So you want to have the most unique style captions on your videos, or maybe you just want to copy the style of someone else. Don't worry, Captionator has you covered. In this video, I'm going to show you how to pair Captionator and Apple Motion to make the most unique style captions in Final Cut. So you can go from captions that look something like this to something that's a little bit more exciting like this, or maybe somewhere in between. Now for this tutorial, you're only gonna need Final Cut, Captionator, and Apple Motion. Now other users also post their Apple Motion templates in the Discord server, so you can join that over here. Now I'm not gonna go into great detail on how to use Apple Motion, but if you wanna get into that kind of detail, I highly recommend Dylan Bates' masterclass. I've been taking over the past couple days, and I gotta tell you, it is showing me things I had no idea Final Cut and Apple Motion was capable of. Now remember, Final Cut and Motion work hand in hand. Motion allows you to create your own styles and templates that you can use on any one of your projects. Now that's really the secret to how Captionator gets you custom titles. It uses the power and performance of Apple Motion and Final Cut to give you any style you want, without any weird extra plugins that do weird things to the graphics engine. Now to get started, you're gonna wanna open up Apple Motion and start with a Final Cut title. We're gonna start with a blank one. It doesn't really matter what your preset is, whether your 4K, your frame rate, etc. It's able to kind of interpolate a bunch of that, but I would recommend setting these to the settings you use most often, just because it can kind of make things a little bit easier to work with. So in my case, 4K, and I'm gonna switch this down to 24 frames per second, 5 seconds, totally fine. All right, let's click open. Now, when you first open up a new template, it's gonna give you a title text and a title background. Super important to get rid of the title background. Otherwise, when you move the title around, the background changes. Definitely the first step I always do is delete that one. Next thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to leave this existing title in here, and it's a little bit important because the way Final Cut handles titles, it uses the first title. So if you actually have multiple text layers, things can get really weird and it might edit the wrong one. So always leave this existing default one, and this is the one we're going to be editing off of. Now I'm going to open up my inspector here and go to my properties, and I'm going to reset this position parameter so it's right in the center. I'm also going to go over to the text and the format, and I'm going to set a font I like. I like SF Pro Display Black. That's a pretty good font. And I'm going to set that centered, and I'm going to set that vertically centered as well. And that's all kind of on your preference, however you want that to work. So on our first title we're going to make, we're going to set a background box like you see in a lot of titles. I use them sometimes, and a lot of creators necessarily use them. So we're going to open up by creating a rectangle. It doesn't really matter where this rectangle is, because we're going to have to do a little bit of work to it first. So you see it appears up here in the group. We're going to move that down underneath the title, because we want it to be underneath that. We're going to change the color here. I'm going to change it to like a kind of a middle gray. Something that white's going to stand out on, because the text right now is currently white. Now we want it to match the styling or the sizing of our text, and the easiest way to do that is go under the geometry tab and go under size. Now we can change the size here, but then when you go and change the text here, edit the text, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. You notice it doesn't change the size there. So to get it to do that, we're going to use a linking behavior. And first things first is we're going to click the little down arrow, and we're going to go add parameter behavior and link. And it's going to create this linking behavior up here. We're going to take our text, drag it over into here, and it's not going to link it initially. So we're going to have to go down to compatible properties, object attributes, size, and width. Then we go and change over the title. As we type, add more characters, we can see it's actually expanding that. So that's perfect, but the height still isn't right. So we're going to want to go and do that one as well. Same exact process. Click the down arrow next to the height. Go add parameter behavior, link, grab your title, drag it over, and go change compatible parameters, size, height. And ta-da, just like that, it is now the appropriate size that we might want it. I'm going to go over here into the rectangle, and I'm going to actually add some kind of curved edges, so it's a little bit less jarring on the edges. And the last thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want it to follow the title. And Apple Motion has a really nice option for that under the behaviors up at the top, basic motion, and align to. Once again, drag your text, put it in the button, and there we go. It's now following along with that title. And with that, the background is now following the text. Now, obviously, it's a little difficult to read that text, so we're going to want to change some of those colors on there. But we're also going to want to add a little bit of padding. So first thing we're going to do, change the colors. Go over to our text and go appearance and change this color. Let's give it black. And let's go back to our rectangle and our link behaviors. Now we're going to want to add a little bit of padding on the left and right and on the top. Now that's really easy. We can just basically go down to our link parameters and change our Y offset, which should increase it vertically. And then our X offset down a little bit below, and that should create our horizontal one. And now no matter what we do with that title, if that title moves around, if that title rotates, that box is now going to follow it. So let's go and undo that, put it right back in the middle. Now this is the simplest possible template you can use in Apple Motion for Captionator. And you can use this as is. But the problem is we want to have a little bit more control over in Captionator. So I want to change the background. I want the background to be modifiable. The easiest way to do that is go under our rectangle here, go under the shape, go under style, and in the fill color, we're going to hit the little drop down and click publish. And now when we go up into our project, under the project browser, you'll see here this fill color is now published. We can change that one. We'll call that one background color. And now whenever you change this color, the background is going to change as well. Gray, we can make it black, we can make it red, whatever color we want. In this case, I'm just going to leave it white for now. And then we're going to go and change that in Final Cut and Captionator. So we're going to save this one. Make sure you save it in a category here that you're going to be able to find it under. And we're going to call this one Template 1. Then we're going to hit Publish. All right, now we're just going to go back over into Final Cut. So I have some test audio here that I had ChatGPT write a quick little script for, something that uses long and short words, so we can kind of get word cadence in here as well. And I'm going to go and send this over to Captionator. Next. So you can change a bunch of style settings in here, but these are always going to be kind of limited. They can only do a certain number of things. So we're going to go under the motion here and click down and click custom. And the side panel is going to open. It's going to ask us to open a motion template. So we're going to click that one. We're going to open our a Captionator tutorial, template 1, and click on the template1.moti. And just like that, we see that title has now come in with a background color. And in this case, let's go and change this to kind of a nice Final Cut Bro orange there. We're going to go into the rest of our titles here. Outline width, I don't want an outline on my titles here. I don't want an outline blur either. And I'm going to change this font here to my favorite SF Pro display. Now, Captionator uses all of your built-in system fonts. So if you don't see a font in here, it means it's not installed on your system. It just means you got to go and find it and install it. And then there's a bunch of sites you can get fonts from. Some fonts are paid and expensive. Other fonts are free. Now, if we click Generate, it should give us a title here. We'll go Captionator 21, choose. And here's our test audio. And we see there's that title that we just added. And it's that nice orange color that we just set it to. So that's the real basics of how to set up your own custom style, however you want it. Now, say we don't like this white text color. Well, that's pretty easy. You just open up Captionator, and it should still be on the existing title that you just edited. And we go and change the font color here. We click on this one, and let's just make it black, nice and simple. And then we click Generate again. And because everything is all cached, it's all saved in memory, we click Captionator again. Nice and fast. Keep both. And we go to our title 1, and there we go. Simple as that to change the colors. Now, you might not want to go and re-import that title every single time. You might not want to re-import the template. So the easiest way to do that is go up here and hit the Save button. So there's next to the styles, there's this little plus button. If you click the plus, it's going to ask you to save it. And we're going to call this one Template 1 and hit Save. Now, every time you change your title up here, it's going to change a whole bunch of settings for you. But if we go back to Template 1, all of your settings there, including your background color, your font color, even your fonts, all those should be saved for you. So whenever you want to use it, you just click on that one again, and it does remember which style you used last. So that's the simplest way. Let's add a little bit more pizzazz to this. So imagine we want to maybe make the title twist a little bit, and we want the background color changing with every single title. That's actually pretty easy to do. So we'll go back over into Motion, Apple Motion over here. And we're going to go File and Save As. And we're going to call this one Template 2. So that we're not overwriting our existing template, because I'm going to publish both of these onto the Discord as soon as I'm done with this. Now for this one, we're going to want to, maybe let's make that title twist a little bit. So on every single title, I want it to be able to twist those. To do that, we're going to go up here into our actual text. We're going to go into our properties here, and there's this rotation here. And the one particularly we want to use is the Z rotation. So let's move that one back and forth, nice and simple like that. And we're going to reset the parameter. Now you might think the easiest way is going to be to just go down and hit publish. Well, the problem is Captionator doesn't support all of the different properties, because there is quite literally thousands and thousands of different types of properties, and they're not exactly documented. So having to reverse engineer all of them is a bit of an uphill battle. So instead, what we're going to use is we're going to use the built-in system that's going to let you rig these in a more complicated way, and that's called the Add to Rig. So in this case, we're going to hit Add to Rig, Create New Rig, Add to New Slider. We'll see up here in our project browser, we have the rig and we have this new slider. So we're going to call this one Rotate. And with the rotation, over here on the left-hand side, you'll notice that we have the type text here, .z, which is that text. And it's got a value here, but we also have this rotate slider. And this rotate slider, that's just because we renamed it, it doesn't seem to be doing anything, but that's okay. So what we're gonna go do is this treats it kind of like keyframes different positions on the slider. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna adjust this down to the 0%. We're gonna go to our type text here, and we're gonna move that, say, a little bit this way. We're gonna move it maybe, say, 10 degrees. Let's put in 10 degrees there. And then we're going to move this slider all the way to 100%. And you notice it's back to 0 because that was the default value. Let's move it the other way, so minus 10 degrees. So whenever we now move this slider, it moves that text back and forth about 10 degrees. But we're not done yet. Let's set this down to about 50% as the default value. We're going to have to click the down arrow on this rotate rig, and we're going to have to set publish. And just like we did before, up in the project, over in the project values here, we see that rotate, and the default value is 50. And just like that, we're going to hit save. We're going to go File, Save Motion. All right, so we're going to go back over here into Captionator, and we'll go back here to Custom Styles. And we're going to go and change title up at the top right-hand side. We're going to go back to a Captionator tutorial. We're going to go to template number 2, template2.modi. And you'll notice we still have that background color, but now we also have this rotate value. And we're going to start by just leaving this at 0% here. We're going to change that background color to that nice orange. And everything else looks like it's about right to me. So we're going to hit the generate button there again. Now remember, it hasn't had to recaptionate anything here. It hasn't had to retranscribe anything. This is all in memory, so it's super, super fast to make any one of these changes. So when you're going and creating new titles and new styles, highly recommend just poking at it, just playing with it until it works exactly the way you want. And go keep both, because we're going to want to keep that for comparison. And you'll notice that now all of these titles are now 10 degrees to the left, which is pretty cool. Let's go back over here into Captionator, and let's change the static value. Let's change it to 1 and click Generate. And we're going to go back Captionator, keep both, and Audio 3. And you'll notice all those are now over to the right. They're about 10 degrees over to the right. But what if we want it to move randomly, to move back and forth? So every single title is a little bit different. Go back over here into Captionator, and now under this rotate mode, we're going to go under here and do random. And random is going to basically change it on every single title. It's going to create a new random value and put that number between that minus 10 and plus 10 degrees, back and forth. Hit Generate, Captionator 2.1, keep both, open up number 4, and you'll notice that every single title is now snapping back and forth, just like that. A nice easy way to add a little bit of dynamicism. But let's say we also want it to be a little bit more colorful as well. We want the colors to be moving around a bunch. So to do that, we can go up to this background color here, and you'll notice this change on value. Change on is normally, it normally sets it for a static value, which is the single color. But we can have it change on title, just like we did with that random rotation value. So on every single title, it's going to change the color. And it's going to pick from a palette. So by default, it's going to be this orange color. And let's add 2 more here. I'm going to click this color and let's give it a green. And then we'll click this one right here and it'll give it a blue color. And let's go and hit generate on that one again. Go into Captionator 2.1, keep both. And now you'll see every single title changes colors. Now this is obviously pretty aggressive, these color changes. You might want to make them a little bit more subtle, but it can kind of do whatever you really want it to do. So that's the second stage, the little bit more complicated stuff we can do. But say we want to do some animations with some easing between words, and to do that's a little bit more complicated. So in this case, we're going to go over here to our titles and we're going to change this word count. We're going to make sure each one of these titles has, let's say, 7 words in it. And instead of this rotate being random, what we're going to do is a simple animation. I'm going to show you exactly what it does. All those other values have disappeared. Now this is the simplest form of animation it can do within those custom titles. So we're going to click generate. We're going to go up to Captionator 2.1, keep both. And if we go here, title 6, you'll notice that as that title goes across, it's now rotating it ever so slowly. Just like that. So every title has a little bit more dynamicism in it. Now, obviously in this case, we're using 10 degrees. That's probably way too much. But if you're doing this on a dynamic video, you might do 2 or 3 degrees. It might look a little bit better, a little less distracting. Now, to show you exactly what's going on here, I'm going to click on one of the titles here at the bottom, casting a golden glow across the quiet. And we're going to go show video animation. And you'll see in the video animation here, there's 2 keyframes. And for those eagle-eyed among you, looking at the top right-hand corner of the screen, you'll notice as I scroll across on my timeline that it's also changing the value up at the top through the keyframes. And that's the gist of the simple animation. It just adds 2 keyframes, one at the beginning of the title and one at the end of the title, one set for 0, one set for 100%, and that gives you some really simple, easy way to animate something across the duration of that title. Now, if this title was a lot shorter, it would be a lot faster. So for instance, if we go back here to Captionator and change our words back down to 1, we can click generate, Captionator 2.1, keep both. And now you'll notice that each one of these titles, they move a lot faster now. Now they're jiggling quite substantially and it's kind of distracting. But again, you can do whatever you want. You can have that slider do whatever you want. So if you can imagine that slider moves between certain values or certain sizes, you can do all kinds of things by publishing things to the rig and then having it puppet that rig. So at 0%, it's at 0, 100% it's another. You can add extra keyframes in there to add some non-linearity, some really cool stuff like that. And that's level 2. But let's get to level 3, which is the complicated and crazy one that can kind of do whatever you want and is really the backbone to do some really advanced effects in Captionator. So let's go back over here into Apple Motion and we're going to use the same exact title. We're going to go File, Save As. Call this one Template 3. Hit Publish. Now in this case, we want this title instead to always be, we want it to be static, so we'll do that in Captionator. We don't need to change anything there. But let's say we want the title to kind of write on across the screen. So in that case, we're going to click over here into our title text, and we're going to go to our behaviors, and we're going to add a text animation, and we're going to do a sequence text. Now, this is going to add it across the entirety of the timeline here at the bottom of Apple Motion. And let's add a parameter for it to manipulate. And in this case, we're going to change the, let's say the opacity. Now the opacity is going to change the color of just the text. It's not going to change the color of the background for you. So in this case, we're going to set this from 0%. And you'll notice as we move across the timeline, it's now writing onto that text. And that's useful. But, obviously we may not want it to be letter per letter. We might want it to be word for word. And in that case, you can go up here into the animate and change that from character over to word. And now when we scroll across the timeline, it's going to kind of, each one is now fading in its own. So instead of being letter per letter, it's now word for word. And you might not want it to slowly fade in. You might want it to pop in. To do that, we go over to here to our spread and we change from 1 to 0. And you'll notice now each word pops in as it scrolls across. But, this kind of works, but it's not really going to necessarily work for our Captionator. So let's save this and I'll show you exactly what I mean. So if I save it, template 3, go back over here into Captionator, go change title, Captionator tutorial, template 3, template 3. We're going to set the static value. We're going to set this over to 50%, right about there. We're going to change the background color. We're going to give it that nice orange. And everything else here looks like it's okay to me. We're going to hit generate. And Captionator 2.1, keep both. And now you'll see the titles they're not really in there. And it's because it's not really animating it quite yet. It would actually give us a little bit better results if we went over to our titles here and open this up to, say, 7 words. Click generate. Captionator 2.1, keep both. And could open the new one. And you'll see they're animating on, but at the end, at 100%, it's not really there yet. So what we can do is go back over to our Apple Motion and adjust this over. We go to our sequence text and we can dial this back ever so slightly. We can dial it back by a second or so that now we don't have to be all the way at the end for it to get that. So it's only going to get it for like 1 frame at most or even less. Now it's at least got a few frames to work with. So we're going to save this one again. We're going to go back over here into Final Cut and go over here into Captionator. And because we haven't changed anything that Captionator needs to know about, we don't actually have to go and change any of these settings here. So let's just click generate again, Captionator 2.1, keep both, and open up test number 10. And now when we get to the end, it should always be in there. Now this is good, except for the problem is that some of these words are a lot longer than other words. Now, if we look at this first title here, we see the sunset behind the towering mountains. Well, the sunset is pretty quick, the sunset. Behind the towering mountains. Towering mountains. That's a long piece of phrase. So in this case, it's basically giving it about the same amount of time for each word. So these aren't really going to be following your actual title. Now, that might be an effect you're okay with, and that generally does work for a lot of people. But the reality is we kind of want this to be a little bit more timed with us. And fortunately, Motion gives us that capability as well. So let's open up Motion here. And let's go back over to our sequence text. And instead of saying the speed to be constant, we're going to set the speed to be custom. And we see now a custom speed. And now as we drag this custom speed back and forth, it's doing the same thing that adjusting the back and forth on the actual timeline did. So in this case, let's go back down here to the sequence text. We're actually going to drag this back out to nearly 100% for us. And then we're going to set our custom speed. And we're going to go and reset this parameter so it's not got any keyframes in it inside the actual sequence. And we're going to go to our custom speed, hit the little drop down. And again, remember, can't hit publish because not all of them are supported. We go add to rig, go to rig, add to new slider. So we go up to the slider and we're going to call this one progress. And we're going to set the progress here from 0% to 100%. So you'll see type text here, sequence.text.custom ... 0% is going to be 0%, 100%, drag that across. I'm going to set this to be 100% as well. And now when we drag this progress, it's going to change how much text is on screen at once. And this is going to allow Captionator to know and puppet this depending on how it works. So over here in the progress, now that this is all set up, we're going to go over here into the publish, and we're going to hit the publish. And now we'll go back into the project, make sure it's in there. Progress set for, in this case, 7.8. Doesn't really matter what it's set to because we're going to be manipulating this. We're going to want to hit save on that one. File, save. Go back over into Captionator. Click on our template 3. Change title because we do need it to refresh all this information. Template 3, template 3.modi. And now we see we have our background color, we have our rotate, and we have our progress. So our rotate, static value, 0.5. Our background color, we're going to make that our nice orange. And our progress, well, we can set that to simple animation, but that's going to have the exact same effect that we already had on there. Instead, we're going to use the advanced mode. And this is where the complicated bit comes. Now, we can set it to use by word, by line, or by paragraph. Now, by word means it's basically going to add in keyframes for us for each single word. If we do it by line, it's going to only add in keyframes for each line. And if we do it by paragraph, it's only going to add in keyframes for the entire title. And it depends on what you want to do, but generally speaking, word or line is going to be the most effective ones. Line, for instance, is going to be very useful if you have multi-line captions and you want to highlight the first line and then highlight the second line and then highlight the third line. That's where you'd use the line option there. But in this case, we're going to use word because we're using individual words on this one. So next thing we're going to want to do is add some keyframes. Now this is where it gets really complicated, and I'm going to try to explain it, but this is kind of where the power of Captionator comes in, is the ability to kind of use this and automate these keyframes for you. All right, so the next thing we're going to want to do is add some keyframes into our animation there. So we have by word, and we're going to add timing, and we're going to put this timing at the beginning of each word using the start value. The value we're going to actually use is the end value so that it knows to put a keyframe at the beginning of the title, but it's going to be the value for the end of the title. So it's going to be as if that slider had already moved to the end of that word. So we're going to hit end, and the quantization is time because we're working in time and not in words and whatnot. Time is, as spoken in clock time. We're going to hit generate, Captionator 2.1, keep both. And like that, we should have the sun set behind the towering mountains, casting a golden glow across the quiet, picturesque village as the breeze whispered softly through the ancient trees, creating a serene atmosphere of tranquility and reflection. So as you can see, each one of those words popped on faster or slower than they were before. So instead of it being monotonous word after word after word, now they pop on as they're spoken. And this is much more accurate way to do this. So if we want to see this, we can go and click on one of these and go show video animation. I'll show you exactly what it's doing. So you see each one of these keyframes. So this first keyframe is 18.29, and the second keyframe comes on there, and it basically is timing it exactly as that second word comes on. You'll notice because there's always some little rounding issues and the timing isn't quite exactly the same as it is in motion, that they sometimes will come on a little bit early, but generally speaking, they should be pretty much pretty accurate in there. So that's the gist of how to animate that. Now you can create multiple keyframes. So for instance, if you wanted it to be a little bit more strict on how the words are popping in, you could add a keyframe at the beginning and at the end of every single title, and that way it only changes when the actual title changes. Instead, in this case, it is interpolating between the two. But if you added 2 keyframes, it removes all the interpolation. But this is kind of a really nice way to have it put whatever kind of title stuff you want in there. So this is a useful template. It's kind of like a karaoke style. But let's step it up a notch and let's do our final template here today. We're going to save this one again, save as, and we're going to call this one template 4. Hit publish. And in this case, we're going to leave all these other settings just where they are, except we're going to remove this opacity, remove format opacity. So let's add some extra parameters to this to give it kind of a different type of effect. So I'm going to go in here and go add, and I'm going to go scale, and I'm also going to add in the baseline. And right now in our progress, we're about halfway through. So if we change one of these values, you'll notice everything past that word. So this word that we're on right now would be the over word. So everything before this is capitalized, everything after it is now shrunk because we've changed the scale. Well, let's move this little baseline up a little bit so it's kind of right in the middle. But what if we want just the current word to be bigger? We don't want all the previous words, we just want the current word to be bigger and all the little words to be, the previous and the future words to be much smaller. Well, the way we can do that is instead of changing the sequencing from, we can change the sequencing through inverted. And this can change it so that as the progress comes along here, only the specific word is going to be highlighted. And this is kind of a cool little effect. And it's fairly subtle right now, but you can go and change this to be even crazier. So if you go up here to the scale, we can make the scale much smaller. And let's move that baseline up here to match. And then with that, we should be able to just go into our progress and you'll notice that word, that one particular word is just jumping on us. So that's good. So let's go and save this as template number 4. We're going to go back over here to Captionator. We're going to go change our title again. A Captionator tutorial, template number 4, template number 4. We're going to set our rotate. So let's make this one right in the middle as we did before. Let's go and change this here to our nice orange color. Our progress. Now we're going to change this one to our advanced mode. We're going to change it to word. We're going to put that at the start. We're going to set the value to the end so we get the whole word in there. Quantization value of time. All the rest of this looks all right to us. Let's click generate. Captionator 2.1. Keep both. If we pull this up, we should get the sunset behind the mountains, casting golden glow across the quiet village as breeze whispered softly. Now, remember, because these values are sometimes slightly different in motion, you're going to have to want to tweak these, and you'll have to spend a little bit of time with your advanced motion templates to get it to tweak it right. Sometimes that just means moving the edges of your sequence text in a little bit. Sometimes it means moving them out a little bit. Sometimes it means that you take that slider and you add some extra padding to it. So for instance, if we go over here into motion and go into our rig, into our progress rig, instead of having these keyframes here right at the very end, you might move those keyframes in just a little bit. And that tends to work a little bit better because it forces, even when the slider's at 100%, even when it's slightly back from 100% or slightly ahead of 100%, it'll still always sequence that first letter in. So you can also do it the other way, where you can move that keyframe all the way to the end. And I need to add another keyframe there, all the way to the end. And instead of setting that for 0%, you can set that for, say, 1%. And move the keyframe all the way at the end. Move that one there, go there. Instead of saying that 100%, you might want to move that one back to like 98%. Sometimes that provides slightly better results, but it really depends on your template and really depends on a bunch of other stuff. So we're going to save this here, and it might give us some slightly different results. We're going to go over here into Captionator again. Don't need to change anything here because we didn't change any of the animatable parameters. It's still going to animate those correctly. Click Generate, Captionator 2.1. Go keep both. And that looks a little bit better to me. The titles it's going to take a little bit of tweaking for each title you make, but this is the gist of how to change any title or make any title you want in Captionator, fully animatable. Now, there is a Discord server where people post their Apple Motion templates. I'm going to be posting these templates on there immediately after posting this video, and you'll be able to go and download these and just load them directly in if you want to use them. You can actually post your own as well. If you want to know all the really advanced features of using Apple Motion, I can't stop highly recommending Dylan Bates' Apple Motion Masterclass. Most of these types of tutorial masterclasses I find to be almost completely useless, but this one is actually very useful. He's not sponsoring us. He doesn't even know I'm making this video, but I have found a ton of uses out of that. So if you find yourself missing After Effects for doing like motion graphics and stuff, believe me, Motion can do it. You just need to learn how to use it. It is a very, very powerful tool. Even though there are tutorials online, they don't even scratch the surface of what this thing can do. So with that, I'd love for you guys to send me links to your channels, telling me that you're using this thing. I do know some very, very large channels that use this for all of their captions. If you're out there, send a like. And with that, happy captioning.